Welcome, everyone. My name is Adriana Bernal. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Manager of Casita Coalition, and I'm excited to kick off our webinar, Middle Housing Spotlight, Townhomes and Cottage Courts, the final edition of Casita Coalition's 2025 webinar series. We'd like to give a big thank you to Arnold Ventures for their sponsorship of our webinar series. Casita Coalition is a 501c3 nonprofit laser-focused on building stronger, more resilient communities by championing diverse, attainable housing options through ADUs and middle housing. We bring together a powerful network of homeowners, practitioners, and policymakers across the country to remove barriers and unlock the full potential of middle housing. Through narrative change, systems reform, technical assistance, capacity building, and smart policy, we're pushing the housing conversation forward and getting results. Now, a little housekeeping. You'll find bios for all of today's incredible speakers and panelists posted as a link in the chat. And to keep things running smoothly, please drop your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, not the chat, and we'll tackle them during the audience Q&A session at the end. This webinar focused on townhomes and cottage courts is the first in our Middle Housing Spotlight series, showcasing home types that were long excluded from our communities by restrictive zoning, but that are once again attracting attention because of their potential to improve affordability and make our neighborhoods more inclusive. Efforts to create by right zoning allowances for middle housing types, such as townhomes and cottage courts, are gaining traction across the country, but as we know, zoning reform is just the first step. Other challenges can keep middle housing from being permitted, financed, and built. Our Middle Housing Spotlight series will continue to highlight examples of success and look closely at what it takes to make these exciting projects real in the world. We're very pleased to introduce our three presenters, who will share their expertise and on-the-ground experience building townhomes and cottage courts across the country. We have Taryn Bell, Realtor at Bell Liberty Group and listing agent for the Cottages of Carey Park in Atlanta, Georgia. Rhett Fussell, founder and real estate consultant for Raleigh Area Land Trust in Raleigh, North Carolina. And Eli Spevak, founder and owner of housing development company OrangeSplot in Portland, Oregon. Our Q&A session will be moderated by Sylvia Aguilar, Operations and Program Manager at Casita Coalitions. We're excited to learn from our expert panelists, and we hope to inspire you to see the benefits of cottage courts and townhomes in your community. With that, let's get started. I'm handing it off to Taryn, who will kick us off.
Perfect. Thank you. I hope you all can hear me okay. Perfect. Okay. It's great to be here with you all this afternoon. And yes, my name is Taryn Bell. I'm here in Atlanta. My company is Bell Liberty Group. I'm brokered by Keller Williams, and I'm the listing agent for a great development, the Cottages of Carey Park, located on the west side of Atlanta. So the Cottages of Carey Park, one of our goals was to address missing middle housing or the need for missing middle housing in addition to providing attainable for sale housing. So our project is infill, so we are not a contiguous subdivision. We are urban development, so we're infill, and we feel that that strengthens neighborhoods. And you always hear with regard to developers coming in, developers making decisions on behalf of the residents, and we made decisions with our residents. And so that's important to us. Our first phase includes 10 homes. We have 7 on one street, 3 on another, and I'll break down the footprint of those homes. So like I said, this is our first phase of development. We'll be building for the next 4 to 5 years. But we do have in this phase a total of 10 homes, all positioned within existing residential fabric in the Carey Park community on the west side of Atlanta. Our homes, our price point focuses on attainable for sale housing. So our price point is $215,000 to $405,000.
Taryn, just say next when you're ready for the next slide, please.
Sure. So what does that look like? These 10 homes, in terms of our mix, we have 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. Our largest floor plan was 1,550 square feet. We have properties that are 2 bedrooms. We also have a 1 bedroom unit as well. Next slide. And so this is one of our 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. And as I talk more in depth about this slide, I'll talk to you all about zoning as well. So as you can see, you have this unit here. And then if you look to your left, it's my left, but you have a darker blue house right there. And so that's another 3 bedroom, 2.5 bath. In the rear of the darker blue house, you should see a light blue house. That is our 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 640 square feet. To the right of that light blue house is a 2 bedroom, 1.5 bath, 910 square feet. And so this is what we call our quad. And we were able to accomplish this with our planned unit development, also known as PUD zoning, which allows for more of a cohesive site plan for developers, as opposed to having to follow strict single family zoning requirements. So this allowed us to come in and have more density, which then allowed us to have better price points, more competitive, and what I like to call attainable for sale housing price points. All of our properties are fee simple. So the 1 bedroom in the rear was listed at 215,000. It sold at 220,000. It appraised also at 220,000. To the right, and I believe the property that's to the right that you can't see right now, I believe I have it on another slide, but that 2 bedroom, 1.5 bath, 910 square feet was listed at 275, sold at 275, and appraised at 296. And so the two properties in the front, we have these available. We have 3 properties left, but we have sold 7 out of the 10. We have these 2 properties, and we have a 2 bedroom, 2.5 bath that's also available. Next slide, please. So this is another snapshot of our quad. The darker greenhouse in the rear of the front house is the one I was referring to that sold at 275 and appraised at 296. One thing I can also say about our development is that when we began planning this development, one of our conversations was about investors, and we are not against investors in any way, but we wanted to make sure that we protected the integrity of the community and the integrity of the development. So we're not investor friendly, at least at this phase of our development. So all of our properties have sold to homeowners, and we're really proud of that. The property in the rear, the 2 bedroom, 1.5 bath, sold to a veteran. The 1 bedroom that's next door, it also sold to a veteran. And so we're happy about that. Next slide. So again, going back to the planned unit development zoning PUD, it also allows for creativity in terms of site planning and how properties are placed. So here we have the dark blue house is a 3 bedroom, 3 bath, and then you have a shared driveway for ingress and egress that separate the light greenhouse, which is a 2 bedroom, 1.5 bath. And so homeowners, they do have an easement for this driveway. And so, each homeowner, they access this driveway to enter into the rear, which is their parking pad. Next slide, please. So going back again to our zoning is critical when it comes to attainable for sale housing and when it comes to addressing the middle missing housing crisis that our nation is facing. So again, in this development, we have garden townhomes. We were able to be more flexible with the unit types that we produced because of the zoning change that took about 2 years. And so we have these garden townhomes. The last one sold maybe 2, 3 weeks ago. And so there is a shared driveway as well for ingress and egress, and the parking pad for these 2 units are in the rear. Next slide, please. So this is our one bedroom, a close up of our one bedroom. What makes us different? Well, we are unique, but I would like for this development not to be unique. I would like for this development to be more common because we do feel like it has addressed a need. This house right here, like I said, sold to a veteran, same as the one next door. The veteran of this property is single. Next door, it's a single mom with two children, and she just wanted a smaller footprint. And so it definitely addressed that need. And they also enjoy eyes on the street, so to speak. So some people, with single family homes, perhaps they don't want to be as close to their neighbors, or perhaps they think they don't, or perhaps they think it would be an issue or a sense of discomfort. But our neighbors, our homeowners are seeing quite the opposite. They appreciate it, they feel comfortable. And, going back to eyes on the streets and just people being aware and people being neighborly. So this has been great for our new homeowners. Next slide. Also, let me say this, our properties, for the most part, all of them qualify for down payment assistance with the city of Atlanta, and that has been extremely helpful for our homeowners. So the city of Atlanta has two main down payment assistance programs, one with Atlanta Housing Authority, the other with Invest Atlanta, and they each offer $20,000 to first-time homeowners. And what that means is at the time of closing, you cannot own a home. So even if you own a property while you're first under contract, as long as you don't own that property by the time of closing, you are considered a first-time homeowner. And this has helped tremendously with homeowners being able to access $40,000 in down payment assistance. And that's something we are really proud of. All of our units are fee simple. And so they own the structure, the homeowners own the structure and the dirt beneath the structure. We range from 640 square feet for this first phase to 1,550 square feet. We definitely focused on zoning. As I stated, planned unit development zoning, which was a game changer for us. And we feel like we have been successful in this phase. And so we're looking forward to to continuing to build our next phase, which will start Q1 of next year. Next slide, please. So why does all of this matter? Attainable for sale housing. Why is that important? Well, that's why we are all here to have that conversation. And I think we all know the importance of being able to afford to purchase a home. And that was really, really important to us. And again, that goes back into density and price points, the price of development, the price of infrastructure, the price of building. How does that all tie into then a product and what can we sell that product for? And so the zoning made a huge difference in that because we wanted to sell a quality product that was financially attainable to homeowners. And so this provided home ownership opportunities within the west side of Atlanta, specifically the Carey Park, Almond Park community. And we're really proud of that. And we're looking forward to keep going. And like I said, hopefully this won't be as unique as the years progress, and we'll see more projects like this one.
Next up, we have Rhett Fussell from RALT Consultants, Raleigh Area Land Trust. Rhett.
Thank you. Thanks, Taryn. So I work this is project Cottages of Idlewild is in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it's through the Raleigh Area Land Trust, of which I'm the founder. But I'm not an employee there anymore, so I do consulting work for them on the side to essentially do their real estate development. So this project has been in my pipeline since I started this in 2021. So we're going to talk through that. Next slide. Just before we get into, our project, we are using a community land trust model. So I'm not going to go into the details of a community land trust model, but essentially, we own the land, we sell the structure. So Taryn mentioned that theirs were fee simple, so they own the land and the structure. Ours is different. We own the land, the person then buys the structure, and then we maintain that affordability long term. There's shared equity on the back end when they want to sell. So it's a little bit different structure, but it shows that it can work in various methodologies. Next slide. So what is our project? So this is a project in the heart of downtown. It's a city-owned piece of land. It's the sort of the three blank parcels you see where East Lane Street and Idlewild meet. The city owned it for 20 some years. It had some low income public housing on it many years ago, and they tore it down, and it's just been sitting there vacant for probably 15 years. So they put it out to RFP. Raleigh Area Land Trust won that through a competitive bid. There were 40 some bidders on the project. We were a startup nonprofit, so probably had only been in existence for a year and a half, 2 years. Won the project, and I think solely because of two things. One, because of the cottage court concept that no one else provided, and then because we are a CLT, and that provided long-term affordability, of which the city thought was very important, because this area, as you can see around it, has 700, $800,000 homes. Used to be very low income, but those homes have been torn down, and gentrification is occurring here. The other key to this is a local partnership with RRD. That's called Raleigh Raised Development. That is three African American homeowners that grew up in this community. Sorry, they're developers. They grew up in this community. In fact, the apartments that were on this site, one of them's grandmother lived there, so he was often on this site growing up. So that gets to the community connection that was also mentioned previously, right? Like the development, being a part of the community really matters. So that also helped us. Um, 18 total units are going on this site, and it's all affordable. It's literally less than a mile from downtown. I will say that this is also historically significant, or at least to us. So this location, or this block actually, was the first location where African American slaves were allowed to have land. And so that was also something that we thought was very important. And I'll talk more about that here in a second. So next slide. Um, this is our layout. And so why did we choose a cottage court? And I'll go over this drawing here in a second. We needed to blend into the fabric as was mentioned earlier, because most of these homes are single family around the parcel. Um, but we wanted it to be a lot more density without having to go up, right? Because one, the city, as a part of the RFP process, did not want to change the zoning. They wanted it to remain as it was, which limited the options that you had there. So Cottage Court was a perfect way to do this, to get more density without having to, go up and build apartments or whatever. The other reason we did it was because we thought the sense of community had been lost in this particular community. And so cottage courts allow for more interaction, right? They give you folks that you're growing with, right? You can sit on your front porch just like you used to do and chat to the person right next to you or right across the street from you, without it being a barrier of a street or something in between. Um, and so that allowed us to sort of do that concept. It also helped that Raleigh was trying to get cottage courts in their pipeline, and had recently put in the UDO that cottage courts were now allowed. And so this was the first attempt ever in the city to do anything that was attainable for cottages. So you'll see here on the site, I won't go through it, a little bit different than your typical cottage court. We intended to have two sort of courtyards. You can see on the left there, between the buildings on the left. There is sort of a courtyard there. That will be the common space. We wanted one on the right-hand side, but as you can imagine, the zoning and some of the stormwater requirements, which I'll talk about, caused us to get rid of one of the courtyards essentially and reduce the size of it, unfortunately. So you'll see there's 18 total units. We're going to sell 14 of them. So we will have 14 homeowners in the land trust model. The other four are going to be rentals. And the thought there was we wanted to be able to serve a more diverse population, right? So some lower income individuals with the hope that those individuals would ultimately be a pipeline to become homeowners, whether it be here or in our, in our other properties that we're a part of. You'll see that 50, so seven of the units will be 50% AMI and below, and then seven of the units will be 50 to 60-ish AMI. So it's all less than 80%, with the only one rental being at 80%. Next slide. So this did not come without challenges. So we won this project in June of 2021. If you look down, you notice that we are now in December of 2025, and we just broke ground in August of this year. So it took us more than 4 years to actually get this on the ground. It was already zoned. We didn't have to do any of that, but there were a lot of challenges. One, we were a startup new nonprofit, so we had to build confidence that we could actually do this. And when I started this, I was part-time. Well, I still am part-time. I was part-time, so doing this on the side in addition to my regular job, people didn't believe in this. The biggest issue I would say is the city coordination issue. Now, this is not a negative reflection of the city of Raleigh. It's just the simple fact of development is hard. I mean, I think Taryn even I say Taryn. Sorry, I know somebody named that. It's Taryn. She mentioned like it took them a while to get things going, right? It took us 4 years to get through this. It took us 18 months to redesign stormwater 3 or 4 times, which is insane, right? It's a little crazy. The city itself had problems with turnover. We had 6 different project managers in that time, and every time you start over, it's like starting from scratch, having to explain the project again. And so, as you can imagine, one of the other one was this was a historic district that doesn't allow certain things to occur in it, even though the city didn't understand that when they passed the cottage court. With a historic overlay, there were certain requirements that you couldn't do certain things. So we had to combine all the property into one, um, so that it would fit under the historic overlay district. So we sort of tricked the system in that way, but that's the only way we could make it work. But nobody knew that going into this. Financing is probably the biggest one. So banks just don't want to trust small startups or somebody that hasn't been in this for many, 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 many years, especially with affordable housing, because a lot of them don't understand it. It's not a knock on banks. It's not a knock on them. It's just it's a hard thing to do. When you're not making a profit, they don't understand, right? And so for us, it took almost 2 years to convince. We went through four different lending institutions to get this project across the line. And so next slide. So there's a lot of different things. So you'll see here's our development summary. So it's costing us about $8 million to build these 18 units. 4.2 of it's a construction loan, so that's the hard part. That's the part that took us the longest. However, in order for us to get that construction loan, they required us to raise at least a 20% of that up front and spend that money first before we could actually get to construction, which also created, a huge problem. But we did it. And so you'll see that the city and the county also gave us loans, either interest-free or a really low loan. On the back end of this thing, we have a state housing finance agency that's also coming in to support the rental project part of this. So it was a lot of funding pieces. I think our lawyer said, I've done a lot of housing in my day, and not even LIHTC project was this difficult to piece together the funding. So just putting that in perspective. Next slide. So kind of a few things I highlight. We couldn't have done this without private citizens, right? I mean, and or corporate foundations. They're awesome. Sometimes it can be painful to apply for grants, but I think once you get into we're helping to build attainable housing, right? For teachers, police officers, your neighbors, right, that are working very hard to contribute to the very benefits that you're taking advantage of. People get it. we couldn't have done this without the city and county at all. There's no question about it. Obviously, the city donated the land for $1. So imagine that. Like, I mean, that's basically a $1.2 million tract of land, in the heart of downtown that somebody could have built $800,000 homes on. And we couldn't have done it without subsidy. Now, I think in Atlanta that y'all aren't needing subsidy, but we definitely did because of various things. Stormwater obviously is a huge part of this. We also, just so you know, we had to actually redo all the water and sewer in the street because the city has rules that if you are doing a development of a certain size, you must help them upgrade the old infrastructure. So imagine an affordable housing project having to put in $275,000 worth of infrastructure, right? That sort of defeats the purpose of being affordable. So challenges like that. I will say one good thing is we've done something really cool for our homeowners. So they will be getting a 2% below market rate loan for their homes. One of the local institutions, Coastal Federal Credit Union, really got on board with this, and they're like, "This is amazing. We want to be a part of this." So next year, when people go to finance these units, they will benefit from a 2% less than market. So we're talking 4.5% somewhere in there, which means they can afford more house. And it also means on the back end, they're getting a lot more equity. They're paying more on their mortgage than they are on interest. And that was the important part to us to help that wealth building piece, even that was mentioned before. And I think community first. We chose local development partners that knew the community, that were a part of the community. We've done a lot to have interaction with the community. We're doing a huge art project on site where we'll have African American installation, and that's all been driven by the community. We have done none of that. That's all been community work that one of our local art agencies is leading. Next slide. I may be a little bit over time. Apologize for that. I won't go through this, but this is just to give you an example. So we are in this 150 to 275,000, depending upon the size of the unit. Typically, these homes would sell for 450 to 500 plus in this area, probably even up to 600,000. So we're talking about less than half for sure for all of these units. Next slide. And then this just shows an example of the unit. So these are all duplexes, so a little bit different from the cottage court previously seen. All of ours are duplexes with both sides being the exact same images. They range from about 1,000 square feet up to about 1,500. But we also thought about in advance sort of this aging in place and or for multi-nuclear families where there's different age groups living together in one household, especially in this community. So we kind of try to consider that as a part of the cottage course that we did. So I'll stop there and I'll pass it off to Eli.
Hello,
You're
everyone. My
muted,
name is
Eli.
Eli
There.
Spevak. Can you hear me? Great. Thanks so much that's great to follow Taryn and Rhett because they are showing a lot of details on a couple of projects, and I'm going to present a whole bunch of projects. And I'm a developer, general contractor. My background's affordable housing. I now do co-housing communities, and I oftentimes partner with our local community land trust. Hopefully, my developer fees pay for my policy habit because I've also been involved in planning code updates at the city and the state level. And all I really want to build is what's now called middle housing, and I've been doing it for a long time. So this presentation will share some projects that were developed before we did a batch of code changes, and it was difficult to do those projects. And then I'll share a batch of projects that were done clear by right over the counter permits since the code changes. So let's start with, let me see if I can go forward here. There we go. So before what's called the residential infill project or RIP, it was a lot harder and slower to do projects. So if you were going to do any of these middle housing projects, you had to get comfortable with condominium, plan development processes, changing the zoning, sometimes density transfer, and it's not easy and it's slow. So here's one example I did. I had an existing house on a site, a single family home, and I put an ADU behind it, and on the side lot, a new house and a new ADU. So I had four homes, sold them separately as condominiums, and it was very affordable housing in an expensive neighborhood. Here's some images of it. You can see in the upper left the existing house and then the new stuff that we built. So that was an experiment, but I had to do a lot split in a condo process. Here's another project where we had an existing turn of the century farmhouse and built an accessory dwelling unit on the site, sold them separately. Once again, had to do the condo process. And other builders in Portland since then have done dozens of these, but those are the couple that I did. Here's another project. It's 16 homes on 2 acres, which typically would be done through a subdivision process where you put like a road up the middle and a cul-de-sac at the end, and then you put homes on either side. We didn't want to do that layout. We wanted to have more of a community-oriented design. So we did this, but to do it, we had to go through a plan development process. It took 9 months to do that. It was discretionary, so there was no guarantee of success. It worked out great, but here's what it looks like. This is about 12 years old. I live in this project, which is a little bit crazy to live in your own project, but I do. It's lovely. That's our common house in the upper left. This is the development, 100% with the Community Land Trust. It was originally platted as 4 separate narrow lots. I wanted to build 8 homes there because it was more becoming for the location right across the street from an elementary school. So I had to get a density transfer, which I achieved because I had to work with a neighboring property owner. And we built this out. They're permanently affordable homes. It's a great project, but it wasn't easy. This is a development, 23 homes on an acre and a half. The original property had 2 half-acre lots that were zoned single family and 1 half-acre lot that was zoned multifamily. Well, a split zone site is difficult to work with. I went through a rezone project, comp plan update to make the whole thing zone whole thing zone multifamily, and then I could lay it out any way I wanted, and I wanted to lay it out like middle housing. So we have a whole bunch of 2 and 3 unit buildings. This is what it looks like when we just finished it. There's a common house right in front of you in the main picture, bike shed, and this is what it looks like last year. It's a really nice community. The homes are attached side by side, ranging from 1,000 square feet to 1,600 square feet. So those are just like pre-zone changes. But then here's some of the changes we've done in Portland and the state. We have the residential info project, and I'll describe each of these in a moment. We passed a couple state laws, and then we had a sheltered housing continuum project. So first off, the residential info project, which is the best known project, I think, from our town, it caps the size of a oneplex, like a single family home, at 2,500 square foot on a 5,000 square foot lot. And previously, homes were getting built a lot bigger than that, like 3,500 or more. So we decreased how much you could build a single family house, but we increased the size if you build 2, 3, or 4 homes on that same lot. And here's how we did it. We basically said if you're building 2 homes or a house plus an ADU, you have 3,000 square feet to play with. If you build 3 homes, you have 3,500 square feet to play with. If you have 4 homes, you have 4,000 square feet to play with. And if you retain the existing house, you get a bump up of FAR, floor area ratio, of 0.1. So you could have 4,500 square feet to play with, or smaller in the other instances. And then if you build half the homes affordable, then you can have a 1.2 FAR, like 6,000 square feet to play with. We also dropped off-street parking requirements. We required that if you're going to do a multi-unit project, you have to make a third of the homes visitable, meaning that you have to have no step entry. You have to have a certain amount of accessible bathroom on the first floor and a certain amount of living space on the ground level. And we calibrated this to make sure that we didn't destroy more existing homes than were happening before this project happened. So the wonky way of saying is we didn't change the residual land value by doing this code change. Then the state of Oregon said, hey, this looks good. They made it go statewide. So all mid to large cities in Oregon have to allow 2 to 4 plexes, townhomes, and cottage clusters by right. Small cities have to allow 2 units by right. And in introducing cottage clusters, which Portland had not yet done, they said the cottage clusters can have between 4 and 16 in a project, average size of them 1,400 square feet, cap the stories at 2 stories so they're not too big. They have to be at least 6 feet apart. Half of them have to face onto a shared courtyard. And the pre-existing house, if you have a huge house, that doesn't mess up with your averaging. You can sort of grandfather that house in. After the state passed that law, the Habitat affiliates in Oregon and the home builders teamed up to get another law passed called SB 458, just the next year, next session, which required cities to allow what's called a middle housing land division. If you build like a fourplex or a cottage cluster, the cities have to let you split that into separate lots, so you don't have to do condos, because some builders don't want to touch condos. And it said that you have to be able to go through that process of doing the little mini lot split while you're building it. The city had 60 days to approve those changes. So that meant just like condos, you can literally divide your lot into multiple units and sell the homes individually. You never have to go through a wrap policy or any of that stuff. And that has to be done by right while you're building it. One more project I should definitely mention is called the Sheltered Housing Continuum project that Portland did, which drops occupancy limits based on household composition. This project is intended to make the least cost housing legalize the least cost housing options out there. One is to allow additional kitchens in a single family home, which previously had been prohibited. People sometimes want to share housing but not share a kitchen. Outdoor shelters for larger sites, particularly for nonprofit, providing housing for people who live otherwise on the streets. And then one great thing we did was we allowed an accessory recreational vehicle to be lived in, one per lot, as long as it's parked behind the front of the house. It can't be a short-term rental. The wheels have to stay on it. This is like an RV or a tiny home. And if it's got plumbing, it's got to hook it up to plumbing. We've had in some neighborhoods as many of these built as accessory dwelling units. So here's some examples of completed projects. I'm using the new rules, which are much easier. This is one I developed, is an historic house, single family home, and on a corner lot, I tagged two townhouses onto the side of facing the side lot. So this is a great example of using that additional bonus by preserving the existing home. Here's a developer friend of mine who built, this is a fourplex on a corner lot. You can never have done this before, and he could just do it over the counter by right. This is a sixplex that I did, which is I actually did two of them at the same time. This is where half of them are affordable. I just decided to be a guinea pig to that new rule. And here's what they look like in practice. So I made them very similar to each other. A little bit of efficiency there. Um, and those are most of those are with the community land trust and actually net zero thanks to a funding source. Here's a four cottage development that reminds me of some of the ones we saw earlier. Once again, this has been over the counter, and before you'd have to go through a plan development to do it. Here's one where the existing house was preserved and is now part of a 5-home cluster. And these are all sold separately fee simple, although I think that the developers now have a choice of whether to sell them fee simple or do condos. This is a larger development on a larger lot where you have 11 cottages all in the same lot. This is a 4-home cottage cluster. Got a couple more here. This is one, 15 homes, all with a community land trust. Just finished a really nice project in a city outside of Portland, Milwaukee, Oregon. And this is just to think that not everything's going to be lovely. This is a 16-home project down the block from me, which doesn't look at all like a cottage cluster. Look at that site plan from above. This is allowed by right. So some builders will use these codes to build a lot of small homes. I'm frankly rather have this than 3 McMansions on that lot that otherwise would have been there. But sometimes I think the city's probably going to update the rules a little bit more to make it a little more focused on the courtyard that's shared. So the numbers, I'm going to close with this. We've had in less than 3 years, 1,400 ADUs and middle housing units built in a market that has really languished for market rate housing. Since RIP demolitions have not increased, and the number of homes per demolished unit has more than doubled from 1.64 to 3.88 homes per demolished unit. The average sales price of new homes has dropped by $250,000. It's mostly because the homes are smaller, but the market wasn't building the smaller homes. And the most common type we're seeing are 2-bedroom, 900 square foot homes. Many of them were listed at 400, but now we built too many of them, arguably. So now the price is coming down into the mid 300s. And that's the way the market's going. So where things go next, the state passed a law this past session, which requires cities to allow up to 4 cottages in a cluster that allow them to be attached to each other. So you don't have like that picture I showed of all the homes, all little detached homes. Now you can group into groups of 2, 3, or 4. And also some cities like Portland require that your fourplex or threeplex, they have to be attached to each other. That's going to go away. The cities are going to have to allow detached versions of small plexes. And I also expect that although most of the activities happen in Portland and Bend and Eugene, some of the larger cities in our state, as home builders realize what they can do, they're going to start bringing this model out to the suburbs and some of the smaller cities. And that's it. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing so someone else can take it.
All right. Thank you, Taryn, Rhett, and Eli for your presentations. You all highlighted the importance of starter homes and innovating programs that are getting them built. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Sylvia Aguilar, and I am the Operations and Program Manager here at Casita Coalition. I'll be moderating this Q&A to go a bit deeper and see what the audience would like to learn more about. So let's see what folks are asking. We've had a couple of questions in the Q&A, and one of them has to do with co-housing. and the challenges to get off of the ground. To what extent do these mini subdivisions have structured anything that organizes the residents? Also, what's the history of these types of projects and how have they evolved, been able to resolve conflicts, and grown to be more interactive? Eli, can you address this question, please?
I'm trying to jump my windows around, but yeah, I mean, co-housing is a sort of a niche form of development that I personally love, and a lot of people do across the income spectrum, where you create a common house that's shared by residents with like a living kitchen space that's bigger than anyone's individual living room, so you can host 30 people over, or like movie night, things like that outside your home. It's especially nice in like a rainy climate like Oregon. And I'd say that. But a lot of the cluster design and the it's really community oriented design. I mean, I did affordable housing projects for a long time, and oftentimes there's a common like a library room or a kids rec room or a computer learning center built into the community, and those serve a similar purpose. I think that if you look at Ross Chapin's stuff from the Puget Sound area, it's some really lovely courtyard-oriented developments where there's not a common house, and that's fine. I mean, the idea is to have a community, which I think I saw in some of Rhett and Taryn's project too, that where it's expected the residents are going to see each other when they come and go, and they're going to have opportunities to interact informally. And I think that's a design sense. And unfortunately, designing projects that have that sort of layout is hard to achieve in traditional subdivision codes. And so even when I was doing projects before these code changes, I was still going through plan development because I didn't want to lay out all the homes around a driveway, basically. And in order to get that flexibility, I had to go through discretionary processes. And now it's much easier to do. I don't know if I answered all the questions, but that's most of them, I guess.
And
Yes, thank you, Eli.
we have a question in the chat about an acronym that Rhett mentioned, the UDO, the Unified Development Ordinance. Is that right?
That's right. And I answered it a few times in different locations, I think. But Unified Ordinance Development Ordinance is basically the zoning rules, basically what you can do on your property and how how it can be achieved. So that's how Raleigh refers to theirs as the UDO.
Okay. Then we've got another question about how to determine if a project is feasible, if it's going to pencil out. So the question asks, how do you create a pro forma with the details, and what is the work involved in figuring out feasibility for these projects? Roughly, quickly.
I'll start, and then others can jump in. So for me, I had never done this before. Full disclosure, it's not what I do in my daytime job. So I created a pro forma from scratch, just kind of thinking through the logistics of, well, what does this mean? And then I found a pro forma online actually for just so like a developer that was working on some other projects. So I sort of took from that and combined and made my own. The Performa has now turned into 20 some pages of tabs because each sort of partner in the deal has their own piece that they want, right? So that's kind of how we did it. And, for us, penciling out was, obviously not that it was going to make money, is are we going to break even? And are we going to have homeowners that can afford units at a reasonable price? So I'm happy to share the one that I have. You're certainly willing to take a look at it. It's a little scary, but you're welcome to join, to look at it.
Thank you, Rhett. We also have a question about community support. How have communities supported middle housing in your area, and have the zoning changes and have made the zoning changes necessary to support middle housing? So let's see, Taryn, can you talk a little bit about community support for your project?
Sure. I'll say initially when we went to the community for the rezoning to planned unit development PUD, there was pushback. Oftentimes when there's something new and when you use words like density, it scares people. And so we definitely did have pushback from the community which resulted in more conversations, deeper conversations, and asking more questions. When you hear density, what do you hear? What do you think of? What are you afraid of? So those deeper conversations, which did lead to approval and us, being able to rezone the area. So with the zoning, the rezoning, I would say we definitely had pushback. Once we started building, there's always some community pushback when construction happens. No one's happy about construction. Uh, but I think it's really important to form relationships and to communicate. The residents, they have my phone number. This is a small community on the west side of Atlanta, but we also, go to their neighborhood association meetings. They have my phone number, so I'm able to answer their questions and address their concerns. Ultimately, once the first phase was completed and we actually, started to sell and get home buyers in, that definitely changed for our current residents because now you're welcoming new neighbors and new homeowners. So I will say overall, it has been positive. They see the work that we're doing. They see that we are bringing in homeowners who want to be a part of the community and embrace the west side of Atlanta. So I would say overall, it's been positive. One thing I can say is over communicate and build relationships.
Great. Thank you, Taryn. We have another question to ask.
Hold on. Eli, you wanted to say something on that?
I was gonna just share. I mean, changing the rules of the game, like at the level of an individual project, sometimes it's so easy to have objections and concerns raised. It's nice if you can lift it up to the level of local government, where you can say, look, you can just build this sort of project by right. Everybody can do it. It's and sometimes that is even hard because you have people opposed to new housing in their neighborhoods at the local level. That's why sometimes it's nice to get at the state level where you can like the politics sometimes get better as you get to higher levels of further away from the details of a particular project, which can galvanize opposition. And I wanted to do one quick shout out for development proformas. The Incremental Development Alliance does a great job of trainings across the country. And yeah, look at someone else's budget, not to get the numbers right, but to get the categories of expense right. So that's enough. Thanks.
Thank you, Eli. So a question to all. What are the average square foot costs to build and what building science is being used? Stick build, modular, panel, structured, insulated panels. Rhett, do you have to chime in on that?
Sure, I can start and then others can jump in. So we are doing stick built. We're not to modular yet, but we have been working in the background on doing that for another project. Um, but our cost is probably a little higher than what we typically would see. I think we're in the 190 per square, 200 per square, but that's just the build. But then when we add in everything else, it's a lot higher than that because of all the other issues that we're being forced to do. So ours is a little higher, I think, than what we would do in our next project.
I'll jump in. You can't get square footage numbers from developers because they change. I mean, most recent project was in the mid 200s per square foot, but there's all the funding requirements of a wage rate and net zero, so solar PV on the roof, heat pump water heaters, heat pumps. I think that I can remember doing projects for 168 a square foot, but that's years ago. So it's always changing. And I guess in terms of the budget side of it, I repeat. Rhett's point about not having to be paid for a nonprofit. Nonprofits have to make money too. And a lender wants to make sure that someone's being paid for the staff time to make the project happen. So even if you're not going to charge as much developer fee as someone else might, you still got to have a fee in there because sometimes projects don't work out. You have to be able to make money on some for the few that you lose it on.
Thanks, Eli.
For
Taryn?
Sure. For the Cottages of Carey Park, we are stick built as well. We partnered with a well-known attainable for sale housing builder here, Fortis Homes, which is led by Jim Cheeks. And so he got our numbers down. He has his numbers down to a science. And so it worked out perfectly for us. I can't say exactly what we were per square footage, but what Eli and Rhett says, it sounds, pretty aligned for where we were. But our builder, he focuses on the affordable housing space. And so he had everything down to a science for us.
Thank you. So also have another question in the chat from Karen. Karen asks, have your cities raised concern with the density of bungalow courts or the proximity of the units to each other as it relates to fire risk?
So ours haven't directly, but it's funny you asked that question. So because cottage courts were so new here or are so new here, essentially they wanted us to go through the commercial code, which is crazy, right? Because we're just building duplexes, which are no different than, anywhere else. And so they were going to force us through the commercial code, which meant we would have had to put in sprinklers and all kinds of stuff, right? Which then just adds up to more costs for something to make it less affordable. Luckily, we were able to convince them that that was not the correct thing. But I think that's a valid concern.
We don't have any concerns with fire. I mean, we're just building smaller homes. The cottage cluster rules, they have to be detached from each other, so that's a fire safety provision. When they're attached to each other, in the three, fourplexes, most builders are building them to the residential code and then doing a 2-hour firewall in between the units. So it's basically sprinklers are not required. The only case projects I've had to do sprinklers on is when some of the homes are far from where a fire truck can get to. In that case, I have to sprinkle them to a 13D standard, which isn't all that expensive, and only for the homes that are furthest away from fire access. And it's pretty standard fire code.
For us, all of our homes meet standard fire code standards. So, yeah, we don't have any concern with that. In terms of accessibility and fire trucks, we're all good in terms of our driveway width and all that good stuff.
Great, thank you. So the next question is for all of you, and just want to really highlight partnerships. And what have you found are the most essential partnerships to get your projects across the finish line? So how can local governments, nonprofits, and community organizations collaborate to expand access to and the development of townhomes and cottage courts? Rhett, can we start with you on this one?
Sure. So partnerships for us, at least, the city was a key here, right? Because they were ultimately controlling some of the land, right? They owned the land. They also controlled the, UDO slash putting in the cottage court concept, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to do that. So that partnership has been like critical to us. We give them all that, credit for helping us get through that. I'll also say that having a local connection matters. And so a local connection with communication, as Taryn said, like constant communication, like they have our phone numbers. One of the partners, RRD that I mentioned earlier, African American, guys that grew up in the community, people just text Terrell and he calls me and we chat with them on the phone. Like it's just that local connection, I think, would make this almost impossible to achieve for us. So I think those two partnerships have been key. The other one is we don't try to do things that we're not good at. So like we have other folks in our region that are good at housing counseling, that are helping to qualify, those individuals. We let them do that work. There's no need for us to try to step in and recreate the wheel. So creating those partnerships has also been successful for us.
I would
Taryn?
say for us, yeah, certainly the same thing. And I love what you said, Rhett, about local connection. That definitely matters. I would say that, once we started the rezoning process, just in terms of what the goal was, we became more familiar to city leaders because it was new. Um, So, that's a partnership there that's, always evolving. I would say it's definitely important to partner with entities that are able to provide some sort of financial support to homeowners, whether that's down payment assistance or whatever. So, and for us, as I stated, that was Atlanta Housing Authority and Invest Atlanta for a total of $40,000. I think those are game changers. And with that, we were able to form relationships with certain lenders that work in the affordable housing space and say, you know what, there's additional money out there for this home buyer. So that has been critical. So I would definitely educate yourself on the financial resources that are out there for home buyers.
I mean, on a project specific basis, even if you don't have to go through a discretionary review, it's good to meet the neighbors around the project. Because there's all sorts of ways neighbors can be helpful or make things difficult, even if you can do the project by right. And for the affordable, I totally agree. Affordable housing funders, especially, I would say at least in my experience, affordable housing funders know the tax credit world for rentals really well, and they don't tend to understand how some of the homeownership financing works. So there's a learning curve that sometimes I have to help the lenders climb. Like what's a partial release of when you're paying them? They're used to have their loan paid back all at once rather than in chunks as you sell the homes. There's plenty of market expertise in that, but the affordable housing funding world doesn't always have that skill set in-house. So that's part of building education.
Great, thank you. So there's so many great questions being presented, but we're running short on time. So this will be the last question. And just really curious, we want to know if there's a housing type or a project configuration or unit count that you see as a sweet spot for the smoothest development process that will create attainable homes. Eli or Rhett, want to give it a shot?
I was distracted by one of the questions in the chat. Someone else jump.
Um, you know, I think it just depends on the area. Honestly, on the region. I will say for us here, I think cottage courts are going to be that part of that solution because people don't want McMansions, as Eli mentioned, right? But they also don't, at least here, don't want, an apartment complex or something that's a lot more density than they're used to. I don't, agree with that, right? But that's the way it is. So cottage courts are kind of a middle ground where you can get a lot more density and still at a cheaper price point to build. That's the one for me. I know that's kind of weird because we're in this kind of meeting about cottage courts, but I do think it's true because cottage courts can take on all kinds of examples of that, as you've seen, right? There's all kinds of examples of that. I think all of us have shown you something different. And then there's even, uh, mini homes, right, that can also be in cottage court style. So there's lots of examples of that. So I think that's one of the main.
I'll speak from a sales perspective. In terms of housing type, I would say townhomes. Um, and our townhomes are roughly 1,100 square feet, 2 bedroom, 2.5 baths. I would say those were, once we priced those correctly, those were successful. I would also say our smaller footprint single family homes, and we still have unique configurations in terms of shared driveways for ingress and egress, but I would say those were successful as well in terms of a listing and selling point.
And I would say cottage clusters are a game changer. It used to be if you had a single family home on a large lot, the only way to build more homes on the lot was to do a subdivision, which takes time. Now you can buy right, build a whole bunch of homes on the same lot and keep the existing house. So that's really popular, and I understand why builders are going crazy with that. I think that we built our cottage cluster rule says that the footprint can't be more than 900 square feet. So there's a lot of motivation to build all your bedrooms upstairs and the ground floor is living space. It lets you pack more cottages onto a site. What builders have they basically overbuilt houses with no ground floor bedrooms, and so now builders are saying, "Oh, actually, we kind of need to build cottages with ground floor accessible bedrooms because that's where the market. There's a lot of market for people who don't want to deal with stairs, or at least want to have one good bedroom on the first floor, and that's not been met well enough so far in Portland, and that's where the trend is going to go next."
Great. We'll toss it back to Adri for the wrap up. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. A huge, huge thank you to Taryn, Rhett, and Eli for joining us today as panelists and sharing your insights and expertise developing townhomes and cottage courts. Thank you to Sylvia for moderating the conversation. Apologies if we didn't get to your questions, but we really appreciate your engagement, ideas, and the questions you submitted. This webinar recording will be posted on Casita Coalition's YouTube channel after the event, and the slide presentations will be available on the webinar event page on our website. I want to thank our major funders, our webinar sponsor, Arnold Ventures, and our premier members for their support of Casita Coalition, which helps us present these free webinars for all. We invite other ADU and middle housing professionals, community-based organizations, homeowners, and housing advocates to add your voice to the conversation and stay involved by becoming a member of Casita Coalition at casitacoalition.org. In addition, check out our Casita Academy, where we offer Friday afternoon workshops and 3-week courses that cover how to navigate the complex process of researching, designing, and building an ADU. Our website has a number of resources, including our past webinars and guidebooks about middle housing and ADUs for professionals and homeowners. Find more resources on our website, casitacoalition.org. Thank you for supporting Casita Coalition's 2025 webinar series. We hope you enjoy the holiday season, and we'll see you at our next webinar in 2026. Thank you, everyone.